never rests.
Careless in the sky. What a thrilling time to be alive.
What is up, everybody? It is Thursday. It is the Georgia Show. I'm Jake Rowe. He's Palmer Thomas, and we are from Dawgs HQ. And we've had a week full of assistant coaches, 4 assistant coaches, and we're going to talk about and get to all of those interviews and kind of all of those. Not actually have the interviews themselves, but we're going to get to kind of our thoughts on all of those interviews. And we're pretty fired up about it. And Palmer, let's just jump right in and go ahead and get to it. Glenn, the Rain Man Schuman, first coach we spoke to this week. He was called Rain Man by Travaris Robinson, who also says he happens to be a computer whiz. We're going to talk about T-Rob here in just a little bit, but Palmer, we heard Glenn Schuman. He's a little better every time we talk to him, but still kind of a cyborg.
Yeah, I mean, to the point that Todd Hartley was joking. He was like, "Man, I'm glad I don't have to follow Glenn Schuman because typically the crowd after him is pretty dead." I think last year he followed Schuman up. No, I think with Glenn, you can see he's an incredibly smart individual. There's a reason he gets that nickname Rain Man, and that he's a total whiz on the defensive side of the ball. Maybe not the most personable individual, and that's perfectly fine. But
he seems to be real personable with recruits and parents.
Yeah, I mean, maybe he saves it for them. Doesn't bring it out with us. Doesn't want to. He's only got a certain amount of personability.
Little Bill Belichick in there, maybe.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that when you listen to Glenn, you can understand that he's really excited about this defense. And the biggest thing that I took away from him is, him continuing to try to find versatile ways to use his players, to use one of his own at inside linebacker, Jalen Walker. We went out to practice on Tuesday after talking to him, and he was working with the outside linebackers. And so, how does Georgia continue to use him? He played 12 snaps in that SEC championship game, had 2 sacks. That's a stat that really stands out, his hybrid linebacker role. Mykel Williams working with the outside linebackers this fall as well. And, he mentioned Gabe Harris is another guy that can do that. There's a lot of guys on this defense. Those are just front 7 examples. There's, secondary examples as well that cross-train there. And I think to me, the biggest thing that stands out about what Glenn had to say, and really maybe about this Georgia defense as a whole going into the season, is it's all about trying to find the best way to use these players to make plays and cause havoc and get offenses off the field.
Yeah, and I think that Georgia does a really good job of that, and it is kind of a team effort. You really don't know kind of where Georgia is going to try and attack you from in big situations. They do a great job of that. If I were to go and talk about kind of what stood out to me from what he said, I asked him the question to kind of dig into what Kirby Smart said at SEC Media Days whenever he was really, gushing over KJ Bolden, basically. And I said, hey, Kirby says he prepares like a veteran. I don't want you to speak for Kirby, but what do you think that means to you? And he went in to talk about something that, listen, we're in a business with kind of being a team side and being attached to a recruiting brand. That stargazing is inevitable, right? Like you're going to stargaze. Everybody's going to kind of look at the stars beside a player's name. And KJ Bolden's got as many as you can have. He's got 5.
5 plus.
And he's 5-star plus. He's a 5-star by everybody. So it doesn't get any better. Number 1 safety in the country. But Glenn Schuman talking about the fact that maturity, not raw talent, is probably the biggest contributor to a guy coming in and playing right away. I thought it was pretty telling. And for KJ to be kind of given that I guess it's fair to say a mantle of a preparing like a veteran, despite the fact that he's a freshman, I think has a really good chance of getting him on the field early. And, you and I were talking about before the show. I don't think he starts against Clemson, but I think he's going to have a similar path to Malachi Starks.
Yeah, I mean, Malachi was a guy that he didn't start that first game against Oregon, but certainly made a major impact in that game with that, very memorable interception. of a future first rounder in Bo Nix. And then week 2 against that season, it would have been Samford that he was starting.
Yeah, started his first game against Samford and went on to start the next 14, had a pick in his third game against South Carolina.
Yep.
I'm saying numbers-wise, I'm not making any predictions there. I'm not making any predictions starts-wise, but I do think, not starting early, but playing a lot and then potentially starting later on.
It may be easier for KJ to get 14 starts because Georgia could play, 16, 17.
Yeah, probably, yeah.
So, no, I mean, I totally see what you're saying, and I wrote a little bit about that with KJ, and it was interesting, and I guess this sort of, unless you got anything else to say about Rain Man, it can take us to our next guy here in Travaris Robinson.
Yeah, no doubt about it. The guy who coaches KJ Bolden.
He coaches KJ, and it was interesting to hear him talk about, he was asked, hey, why is it that it's so hard to play somebody that's so young on the back end? And T-Rob's a guy that played in the secondary. He was on that Alabama staff. He was technically the cornerbacks coach, but was on the Alabama staff last year with Caleb Downs, a true freshman that was back there, led Alabama, first true freshman in program history that led the Crimson Tide in tackles. He understands what it takes for a young guy to play in the secondary. And, it's difficult. There's no doubt about that. And he kind of pointed to that experience factor being so important back there. And it's just something that comes with time. And, when offenses are making changes and, if offenses are making changes and DBs have kind of got to be the quarterback of it all, especially at safety where you're right in the middle of it. It's something that comes with experience to be able to adjust on the fly like that. When you've got the kind of talent that KJ does and that Malachi Starks had and has, and Caleb Downs had and has, and you can make up for it, especially when you have the kind of maturity that all three of those individuals have. But the margin of error is so small. I mean, defensive line makes a mistake, linebacker can make a play. Linebacker makes a mistake, DBs can make a play. Safety makes a mistake, 7 points. So
yeah, no doubt.
And it's why it's hard. It's so hard.
It is, and it's even further than that. When you got safeties up and run support, you can think, well, the D-line or the linebackers didn't do their job here, but it was the safeties miss run fit, and so there's a lot going on at that position, and it's going to be tough, for him to kind of hit the ground running. But the good ones typically do. And that doesn't mean he's not going to make some mistakes. I mean, Malachi had some struggles there, especially in the SEC championship game that year. LSU kind of toasted him like 3 times. But he bounced back and has been a really good player for Georgia since. I thought it was interesting, kind of going over to Malachi Starks and T-Rob's kind of connection there with Malachi Starks and what he had to say about the junior corner. I mean, the junior safety. The whole idea. I tell my kids about Malachi. I don't know what else you could want to hear as a man hearing from an older man. That's a pretty high compliment. And, the two kind of had a little running thing going on. And apparently Malachi was just kind of working T-Rob too hard and T-Rob quit. So that's what that sounded like to me. But ultimately, it looks like he's kind of building strong bonds with the players in pretty short order.
Jake Rowe calling T-Rob a quitter. Let's get it on the record here.
Quit on Malachi Starks. That's all I'm saying.
Jake, do you tell your kids about Malachi Starks? You're Jefferson. You're a Jefferson native.
I don't tell them about Malachi Starks. My kids don't care anything about Malachi Starks. They care about Roblox and video games and when they get to eat spaghetti again. All right, let's go to Mike.
I do too.
Speaking of video games, these are great transitions. Mike Bobo, not a video gamer. Not my kind of highlight of the Mike Bobo thing, but I did think it was funny, and Palmer did a good job making a video for us. Mike Bobo says the best games to him are Tecmo Bowl and Super Tecmo Bowl because that's all he's ever played. Warren Moon was hell. Chris Dishman was a bad man. He loved the Oilers, and he hasn't gotten into this modern day video game stuff. But the question that prompted that was our Bark After Dark alumni, Mark Weiser.
Mark After Dark.
Mark After Dark. That's about what I said. Yeah. Mark Weiser asked him, hey, according to the returns from this NCAA video game, your offense is really awesome. that's how it works, right? That's a predictor of how Georgia's offense is going to be. And I tell you what, man, Mike Bobo sidestepped it like he's hoping Trevor Etienne sidesteps some tackles this year.
Yeah, I always enjoy hearing from Mike. I guess this is what my third time hearing from him. I wasn't around for some of those earlier ones, like you might have been, Jake. But I think he's just an insightful individual. And the biggest thing that I took away, and it was the first story I wrote out of it today, was he continues to adapt. Going back to T-Rob, I asked T-Rob and said, hey, you and Mike were on the same staff. You were the defensive coordinator. Mike was the offensive coordinator. Will Muschamp was the head coach in 2020 at South Carolina. What's the biggest difference you see in him? And football has changed. It's changed since 2020. It's changed a lot since Mike Bobo's been in the sport. He's, going into his 25th year of coaching. And half of his life, he pointed out, hey, he's 50 years old. He's coached for 25 of them. So Mike Bobo, half of his life has been spent in college football coaching. But he continues to try to learn and adapt. And I think that's going to be so big for this Georgia offense this year, that incredibly talented unit, because they've got to adapt. They don't have a Brock Bowers. They don't have, Lad McConkey, who made a lot of plays for them last year. What you do have is you've got an experienced quarterback coming back for his second season. You've got versatile weapons around him in Trevor Etienne, like you said, Colby Young, Dylan Bell, Dominic Lovett, Anthony Evans, Roderick Robinson, Nate Frazier, Branson Robinson, a very deep and talented and experienced offensive line. You've got all the pieces, but you've got to adapt and find what works best for that group. And so, he's got a bunch of different people he talks to, said, hey, my dad's going to be out at practice today. And I'll talk to him about what does he see? He's the son of a coach. And so, he talks to a coach and says, hey, coach, what do you see? I know his time with Todd Monken was very impactful. He's got other coaches that are on this staff. Brandon Schroeder, former Clemson offensive coordinator, he had Daryl Dickey on the staff last year. He still talks to Mark Richt and Jim Donnan. And so I found that interesting, that even 25 years into this thing, that Mike Bobo continues to adapt. And I think that's probably something that Georgia fans that have been critical of him at times very much enjoy hearing.
Now, the thing that got me was he was talking about Carson Beck, and several questions about Carson, but said that Carson stood up in the front of the room to start preseason camp this year. Thought this was a really, good leadership note here for him, and told all the quarterbacks, hey, listen, you need to be preparing right now. Like, this camp needs to be like you're preparing to start against Clemson. And I can tell you, as somebody who, has kind of had a high schooler and had one graduate from high school and try to tell them something at that age, it probably went in one ear and out the other. They probably didn't listen to a thing he said. But he's right. It is a big thing, but more than anything, Carson was like, listen, I didn't do this when I was younger, and I wish I had. So
it probably comes better from Carson than it would Mike.
Yeah, probably. And so, that's, I don't know, that kind of jumped out to me, and it's something that I kind of took away from that press conference, was kind of the leadership of Carson Beck and how he's gone about things. And, listen, I'm sure there's a lot on his mind right now, but Todd also talked about kind of being where your feet are. I mean, listen, Carson Beck is, he's a year away from probably being, a multimillionaire. And this time next year, it's going to look a lot different. Heck, he could be a multimillionaire right now with the way things are set up. But
Jake, did you
ultimately a guy being, that locked in right this early is pretty big for Georgia.
Did you know he's been passed as the Heisman Trophy favorite coming into the season?
I didn't know that.
I learned that today as I was writing about Carson. Had to correct myself. I was going to get a hyperlink and link over to either FanDuel or DraftKings and just, for the SEO purposes of it, I was going to do that. And I was like, wait, he's not the favorite anymore. Dylan Gabriel, Oregon quarterback.
Interesting.
Believe one of them had Gabriel at plus 700 and Carson at plus 750. The other one had plus 750 and plus 800. I believe those might have been the numbers. I was surprised by that. I don't know what could have happened because Gabriel was not the number 2 option when all those odds initially came out. It was Quinn Ewers. And so I was surprised to see that. That was news to me. And when I texted another beat reporter about it, he said, that's old news. So maybe we're just missing the news.
Yeah, I don't really pay attention to Heisman favorites or anything like that. It sounds like Carson lost some of his Heisman juice, and Todd Hartley brings the juice. So again, that was a forced transition right there. The rest of them were much better. But all right, so Todd Hartley, I got to admit, I was writing a story on Jared Wilson while the Todd Hartley press conference was going on. So my pull here is going to be limited in terms of what I can pull from that press conference. But I figure you might have one off the top of your head.
It's been Urasic.
Yeah.
Not Urasic.
I've been saying it correctly for a long time. I heard it on I watched his highlights on ESPN and those guys were pronouncing it. So I want
to say Andy Staples has been saying Urasic and I've been hearing it and thinking, what is he saying? Like I've been calling him Urasic. So
yeah, Ben Urasic.
Hand up. I was wrong. Urasic. He is Polish. No, I mean, I think that was an interesting discussion with Todd there, and just hearing how they went about going to add him. And obviously, everyone knows Georgia's tight end room is going to be without Brock Bowers this year. And how do they go about adapting to that? Well, they have Oscar Delp. They feel really good about Oscar Delp, but they want to go out and they want to add talent in that room in other ways and shapes and forms. And so they go add Ben Urasic from Stanford. He said, you look at our tight end room and the one thing that we probably needed was some experience. And he's a guy that is a graduate transfer, has 4 different seasons that he's played in, 30 something games under his belt. A couple injuries, have held him back from being incredibly productive, but he's been productive out there in a similar style offense. They used him in similar ways. We saw, go watch his highlights and you see a handoff to him in the same ways that Georgia did Brock Bowers, and very interested to see how he continues to fit in. Kirby told us last week or at media days or whenever it was that he was talking about him. He said, he's a kid that is not just coming in here. He's out of eligibility after this year. So it's not, he is a one and done, but he's not coming in with a one and done mentality. He's really buying into this program, wants to be a part of something special. And so interested to see how he comes along. It was interesting to hear, Todd get asked, hey, how did Lawson Lucky react to that? How did he react to the news that y'all were bringing somebody in? And, I think that was interesting. He said it was kind of a motivating factor that, he's not trying to compete for playing time with him, but he understands that he's probably competing for playing time with him. And, I think that everyone in that room understands where everybody is at. Oscar Delp is the leader. Ben Urasic is the veteran. Lawson Lucky is somebody that is incredibly talented. Jaden Riddell is another person that's incredibly talented. He had some high praise for those 2 freshmen, and Jaden and Colton Heinrich. And, I think that there's a lot to like about this room. Todd really believes in them, even without Brock Bowers, and, still says, hey, I coach the best position group in the country. And, whether that's just him saying it to say it and put that out there and believe in his players, or whether he believes it, we'll never know. I do think that this has a case to be the best position group in the country, still even without Brock Bowers.
Pretty remarkable that can even be mentioned. Listen, I like I said, I didn't catch a ton from it, but something he said really perked my ears up when he was asked what outside linebackers kind of give his tight ends trouble. He said you can't talk about outside linebackers unless you start with Chaz Chambliss. He gave
that's a main man right there.
Pretty much, right around 100 words on just Chaz Chambliss, the savvy veteran, the guy that's so strong, so tough, so physical, just a guy that really causes problems for them and kind of epitomizes what Georgia is as a program. Chaz is not the most beloved figure in the world, but I think folks should start to get the picture on why he plays football at Georgia, why he gets minutes, and he does a better job than you want to. I'm not even saying than you think he does. Than you want to think he does for a lot of his biggest critics. I'm not sitting here saying the guy's a superstar and he's going to be a superstar on Sundays. Unless the fullback comes back, probably not. But in terms of what Georgia wants to do, striking blockers, playing physical, setting the tone, this guy plays a lot because when they look at his film, they look and they say, what did we ask him to do? Did he do that? And then I'm guessing based on, I hate to be too deductive here, but the fact that he keeps playing is probably the answer we need to listen to the most and just kind of live with it.
He said he epitomizes everything that Kirby Smart has made this football program about. And that's a telling statement out there.
I would say that's something that as a football player at Georgia, you should want to shoot for. We're shooting for Sunday night. We'll be back Sunday night to discuss, I don't know, man, a lot of other stuff. We've had a lot of scoop over at Dawgs HQ today. I do know that. So you guys need to come over and join. And if you haven't yet, go check out Dawgs HQ Plus here on YouTube. If you're a member, it comes with your subscription, okay, over at Dawgs HQ. It comes with your membership. But if you're not a member over at Dawgs HQ and you just want to catch me and Rusty every Tuesday discussing intel, scoop, what we're hearing out of the program, our opinions about what we're hearing out of the program, asking each other questions and digging a little deeper into it. If you want all that, come on over to Dawgs HQ channel, hit that membership button, and give us a shot for $3.99 a month. I think it'll be worth it. It will be basically $1 a show, so it's a bargain. But that's all we got for today. Y'all take it easy.